Hey guys, Jester Borris here with I Want to Be a GM, and this is Dragonlance. Dungeons and Dragons Through the Ages, Dragonlance, the world of Kryn. With me today on my right.
I'm Troy, the Planescape guy.
To the left.
Kept my body from last time, Mr. Producer.
I was not able to remove him from his body.
No, it's mine!
But we'll get him next time. Anyway, thank you for being with us today. Again, Dragonlance, one of the biggest settings for classic Dungeons and Dragons, finally brought forward to 5th edition. And we just have a lot going on here. We were just talking a little bit about this. I didn't realize it was so many. Over 190 novels in this setting. So TSR was a huge publisher of books as well as game material. And Troy, you've got quite a lot of information on this, so I was going to have you go ahead and start.
Some of the history of it can be a little bit dry, but I definitely want to let people out there know what the history of the system is.
Right, and one of the things that I think is really cool is it's Tracy Hickman and his wife again.
Yes, it is.
The same two that did Ravenloft.
Yeah.
Same two that did Ravenloft. Check them out. So one of the reasons I think Dragonlance
We're over here now.
Check
over
out
there.
the penguin.
Is so popular is because it has half of the name of the game. Dragons. Dragons are everywhere. It's all about dragons.
I want Riding on Dragon.
Yeah, particularly at the time it was published, one of the things you'll see in a lot of articles is they kind of play on, well, we had so many dungeons in Dungeons and Dragons, somebody thought it was time to really bring in some dragons. And Dragonlance delivers for sure. So depending on its era, there's dragons are plentiful or they're rare, but they're always powerful and they're always important to the setting.
So Dragonlance has turned out to be one of the most popular shared worlds in which the writers created. The first Dragonlance trilogy, Chronicles, launched the Dungeons and Dragons line of novels with as many characters and spin-offs into other novels, as such as Forgotten Realms and, well, you know that stories.
Mm-hmm.
So TSR, most popular series of novels, according to the 1990 by Mark Oxby, is most notable of these series and what may at once time be considered disposable escapist literature, found unprecedented popularity in the 1990s. All of the Dragonlance novels remained in print during that decade. All of them.
All 190.
All of them. Turning Weiss and Hickman into literary stars, boosting their sales of their non-Dragonlance novels. Although the series was initially published in paperback, its success led to hardcover printings. The hardcover versions of Dragons of Summer had impressive first printing of 200,000 books.
It's quite a lot.
That's quite a lot in hardback.
And never made it on Oprah's list?
Every Dragonlance novel by Weiss and Hickman since 1995 has been released in hardcover.
That's pretty cool.
Every one of them.
And you can be sure there's several of them that made the New York Times bestsellers list.
Absolutely.
And made a huge impact, like opened the way for the success that was found with Salvatore and Drizzt, all the Forgotten Realms novels. 190
Dragonlance made
novels.
In print at one
TSR
time.
is one of the most successful publishers of science fiction and fantasy fiction of the 1990s.
Yeah.
Dragonlance. By 2008, there were more than 190 in the Dragonlance franchise. Their novels made over 20 bestseller lists,
Over 20 bestsellers.
exceeding 22 million to print in a dozen different languages. So, it's very popular.
It's part of why we're so excited. It's something that if you were playing Dungeons and Dragons in 1st and 2nd edition, and when this content was new and fresh, it was energizing.
It was completely off the hook. Like, you mean we can ride dragons and fight from their back?
Yeah, like
Yeah, let's do that.
well, it used to be every time a dragon showed up, everybody died.
Everybody dies.
If you remember Through the Ages, when we talk about dragons in the white box, it's basically the in the game button. You're like, all right, these guys are too powerful. All your characters are dead.
Yep.
We're gonna start some new characters. I'm done with this.
Dragon shows up, fade to black, make new characters.
Yeah. But now, we have variations of dragons, wyverns, cultures built around them, their worship, their
All of the different chromatic dragons that were created, right? Because, you still had some of the the different colors of dragons, right? You know, blue, red, yellow, and so on and so forth.
Well,
but eventually they got into like pinks and purples.
we did get some interesting variations. You're right, Mr. Producer. So one of the things that really establishes a lot of dragon lore comes out of Dragonlance.
Absolutely.
And so what we're dealing with here is a world setting with very active deities. That I mean, they're Greek level of active, right? Like you could
walk down the street.
He says, "You are gonna go fight some dragons." You're like, "What?"
He's like, but I don't want to. He's like, but I'm Zeus, and I told you to. He's like, well, fine.
So one of the NPCs was a lord. No, I'm always mixing up. He was a knight of Solamnia, and ended up being the bad guy. Solus, I think it was. But it was basically they're like, "Hey, go stop this ancient dragon evil stuff," and he failed and was cursed for it. Like, thanks, gods of Kryn, that was great.
You told me to do it, and I couldn't do it, and then you punished me because I couldn't do it.
But that's what they did in the setting. But when it comes to the dragons themselves, metallics tend to be good aligned dragons. They were created by the gods of good, and then the gods of evil were like, "That's cool. Let me try that."
I want dragons too.
And so then we get the evil chromatic dragons. So good metallics, evil chromatics, and that split has been ingrained in Dungeons and Dragons.
They took the first sets of books that came out
Mm-hmm.
and turned them into 14 module series.
Yeah.
So you could basically play the first books that came out as novels.
Right.
And I read them,
Mm-hmm.
and the modules were exactly like them, so I spoiled the game, and Rick, my DM at the time, hated me. And so we're all like, well, we can't play this because Dave knows it. I'm like, okay. So he got mad. But he did something very clever. So we were first level characters then. We played for a while, completely forgot about Dragonlance, and we were like third level, and we came across a dragon orb.
Oh, no.
Accidentally in the treasure of this, somebody, I forget what it was. And we're trying to figure out what it was, and of course, if you have dragon orbs, dragon shows up, other things show up, and next thing we knew, we're playing Dragonlance again. Pretty sneaky, Rick. But it was all fun times. But we were scared because of all the dragons, because the world setting we're playing at the time is Greyhawk. If a dragon shows up, everybody dies.
In Greyhawk, the only time you see them when they're big enough and strong enough to leave the lair, it's a problem.
It's a problem. It's gonna be a bad day.
So that's one of the things that's really neat about Dragonlance is, as with any world setting, a large list of cool and unique magic items that really add to the flavor of the world setting. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about some of those specifics here in a little bit. But just the big thing, the first trilogy of novels is the War of the Lance. So the Dragon Queen Tarkesis is making her moves, and one of the things that's revealed later on is that Tarkesis is simply the name or avatar of Tiamat, as she's known in the setting of Kryn. So we have Tiamat's influence from, through all of Dragonlance. Mm-hmm. But, we got 3 large dragon armies. This is the War of the Lance. And that is probably, that trilogy of books popularized the setting. It's what we got the chance to play a lot of. And it's the story that we get actually in 5th edition. So it's a really cool place to jump into the world of Dragonlance and really get to experience a lot of the lore. They throw a lot of history at you. You get to fight a lot of dragon. I mean, it's really a good place to pick up Dragonlance and jump into.
I can find a lot of similarities between the War of the Lance, that series, and the J.R.R. Martin.
The
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones, yes.
Yeah.
We have all these countries fighting each other very ruthlessly to wind up being in charge. When you get that many large countries involved and the absolute hatred they have for each other, right down to the point where the royal families are trying to assassinate each other, and sometimes they do. I mean, that kind of ruthlessness and control, that's what they're after.
It's actually one of the features of Dragonlance, particularly during there's 5 main ages, and they're all marked by pretty intense war. So whether you're being crushed by dragons or you're being crushed by your neighbor, it can be kind of a rough place, which is where heroes have a chance to rise, and that's where it can be a lot of fun to be that hero and to save the day and bring peace back to the land.
So I want to go back to some of the origin story of Dragonlance in and of itself.
The setting, yeah.
And one of the reasons why I think Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss, as a writing team, made this material so successful for TSR.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. The Hickmans conceived Dragonlance while driving in their car to TSR for a job interview.
Yeah. Now, this is important to note. They had been submitting a lot of things to Dragon Magazine and direct submissions to TSR for Ravenloft. Now, we've covered some of that in our Ravenloft Through the Ages. That's on YouTube now, so go check that out.
So, Tracy Hickman met Margaret Weiss at TSR.
Yeah, she was a staff writer for TSR.
They gathered a group of associates, just whoever's hanging around, to play D&D. The
Sounds like a good day at
during
work.
the game inspired the series gaming modules and a series of novels yet to be licensed. So they were playing Dragonlance when they just first met.
Yeah,
So they played it and they wrote it. The fact that they put all that material together shows that they had a love of the game, and that's how they wanted to make the material.
one of the things that's actually interesting, bit of the lore on this, TSR had actually hired a writer to write the novels. They said, all right, Tracy and Margaret, you guys sort out the world, flesh out the lore, let's get some modules written. Tracy, your Ravenloft stuff was good. And then they had a writer who was meant to write the novelization. Well, Tracy and Margaret didn't really like what he was doing, and so they spent a week writing the intro in three or four chapters, presented it to TSR. TSR was like, okay, fine, and then fired their writer. It really was a big passion project. And then the other thing that was cool is as Tracy and Margaret were writing this, a lot of the characters that we find in the books were developed, their personalities, play styles, and those sorts of things from the people that they had playing with them. So I think it was Rastlin the Black, or what they call it, of the Black Robe.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff like that.
So in the very first gaming group, these individuals had characters from the world setting, and they started playing. And as players do, you create and you flesh out the character with mannerisms, the way they walk, the way they talk, and different things that they do. So those mannerisms for those characters were carried into the novels.
Yeah. If you guys want to see a little bit more on that, there's some really great interviews with Margaret Weiss regarding the play sessions and the writing process they went through to put this together. And it's not unlike what we saw with Gary Gygax and his crew, right?
Yes.
So we got Big B and all his spells,
Mordenkainen.
Tasha, Mordenkainen. Those were Gary Gygax's players, PCs, the ones that managed to survive. Or maybe they were reiterated, but they were the core of the game. That's where a lot of those stories and development came from. White Box, First Edition, and so on.
So getting back to history, because there will be a test later, in 1984, I'll say that again for those, 1984, TSR published the first Dragonlance game module, Dragons of Despair. 1984.
It wasn't even on Nintendo.
It wasn't even on Nintendo.
It wasn't even on Nintendo. So since then, first and second edition, Dragonlance was strong. World setting is a strong game system.
Yeah, we didn't actually get a box setting for that, which was weird, but we did get, this is the core adventures, along with the modules themselves, and a couple other supplemental books.
This talks about the races unique to the world of Kryn, and some character classes, character skills, the deities, and the ones that don't care if you pray to them.
Yeah.
It's all that kind of stuff that would have come out in a box set, had a box set.
Yeah,
come out.
but it was nice, because it is all here. It's just, at the time, we got Ravenloft as a box. Greyhawk has 3 boxes of rest development. And so, despite Dragonlance's popularity, we didn't get a full box set for it, but we did get a lot of material through first and second edition, even third edition. New stuff all the time. 190 novels that fleshed out all 5 ages.
Well, they were basically, humans fighting dragons, dragons fighting dragons, dragons fighting humans, dragons fighting dragons again, and then it's just.
Yeah. So I had a thing here.
This is, as far as I know, this is the only map.
Well, this map is actually So if this is the War of the Lance, yeah. This section of the map gets hit with an actual mountain. These people up here tick off one of the gods, and they're like, mountain. And so this ends up being quite an interesting place, depending on which era that you're playing in.
Well, not only that, but that crater is a large section, and then there's like a lot of the stuff through the middle that actually gets flooded because of it.
Yeah.
So it kind of like divides the land with several rivers and a crater.
Depending on which era that you play in, you'll want to make sure your map is correct, because it
changes.
300 years before we jump into the 5e module, Shadow of the Dragon Queen, that's the same thing, War of the Lance. So the Cataclysm is 300 years prior. Yeah. And as you can imagine, when they drop a mountain on somebody, it kind of has some effects.
Yeah. I made my saving throw, man. I'm okay.
Yeah, no, well, people in China felt that one.
Yeah, they're not even in the world setting.
Not anymore.
Talk a little bit about some of the things that are interesting here. Depending on the time period, evil chromatic and good metallic dragons are rare or plentiful. Humans are Kryn's most common humanoid race. However, elves, dwarves, kinder, gnomes, and minotaurs occupy the world setting.
Right here.
The minotaurs are fun. They actually got some pretty cool cultural and tribal stuff in there.
But that's the thing too, is they're more common. So the minotaur race is they're not bestial. They're intelligent. Mm-hmm. They do tend to be more of this setting, sort of barbarian, and they've got some really neat variations on dwarves and what you might find in some of the other world settings.
And 5 variations of draconians.
Yes, so
we're gonna talk about the difference between draconians and dragonborn in just a minute. So stay tuned.
Not the same, but they are a pretty interesting feature of the Dragonlance setting. So,
yes.
Culture gets a little interesting to talk about here.
Because it gets blown up so many times.
It does get blown up so many times. It's
well, there's a lot of unique races there, and there are a lot of races that are there that have a twist to their personalities.
Sure. So
and just some of their quirks.
Yeah. As an example, the genesis of dwarves is not a separate race. Gnomes were created first, and then from gnomes we get dwarves and kinder and all the other halflings and stuff. Kinder themselves are just insanity as they're written up.
I love Kinder.
In 2nd edition. They are a race that's included as a player option in the 5e module, so check that out. It's pretty interesting.
If you are a DM, please take this advice. Do not allow a player to play a Kinder. You will go insane, or you will physically murder that player.
For example,
the Kinder is the only race that I know of that can quite literally die from boredom.
Yes, they can.
If you are on a wagon and you are headed to wherever you're going, and you're on that wagon for 3-4 days, you better check on your little Kinder buddy. Maybe give him a little fidget spinner or something.
They're kleptomaniacs by nature, and anything in their possession for more than 30 minutes is considered a family heirloom.
Yep.
You're not going to find this in the 5e.
It can't possibly be yours. It's in my pocket. How is it yours? It was in my pocket.
So that's the 2nd edition write-up. It's not quite as intensive in 5e, but they can still be a route to trouble. We sort of talk about them in terms of 2-year-olds. The attention span, mindset.
Well, you give a 2-year-old coffee, and then...
and now they can use magic.
A Kinder is immune to all forms of natural fear. The best example is a dragon lands in the middle of town. Everybody scatters and runs because they're afraid. A hero has to make rolls and different checks to see if they can be in front of the dragon, because the dragon instills fear into everybody.
Yeah.
A Kinder has no sense of fear, period. He'll walk right up to the dragon and say, "Wow, you're a dragon. That's got to be neat. What's it like being a dragon? Hey, are your toenails naturally this shiny, or do you have to work on them?
Back here.
You got something stuck in your teeth.
Do you polish all your gold, or do you make somebody else do it?"
Yeah.
They have no sense of fear, 1,000% of curiosity, and they are an absolute joy and menace. If you have a player that can play one well, you're going to laugh, and then you're going to realize you just destroyed your entire game.
For example, see the character Tasselhoff in the Dragonlance novels.
Love Tasselhoff. Burfoot is the guy.
David Tasselhoff?
No, Okay, this is why we don't let you on this side of the camera.
Yeah, I know. You put a microphone in front of me. This is your fault.
Yeah, you don't even know how to switch the cameras.
Well,
Anyway.
No.
I'm over here being disembodied even though I have a body. But Kinder in particular, awesome. Minotaur, awesome. The setting itself is much more high fantasy, but it's got this sort of apocalyptic. Because everything's always like in a state of war. You're always under threat by something. So you don't see a lot of the race mixing that we might see like in Forgotten Realms. You know, it's more Lord of the Rings where you're like, we have to go to the elves, or, you know, hey, the thing is out there somewhere.
If you incorporate some of the Spelljammer features, like your party has a ship,
right?
Dragonlance is definitely someplace you want to put on their bus stop list to stop at, because it's going to make use of that Spelljammer. Because they're up in the air where the dragons are.
Yeah, I want to broadside a dragon.
Yeah, well, guess what he can do?
Get broadsided by my ship.
He can breathe fire or lightning or whatever on your ship.
It makes definitely, you know, with the inclusion of Spelljammer, you can take your characters now from Faerun, go over to Dragonlance, and be involved in that. And then, of course, if they're not the only Spelljammer, you can have Spelljammers of the good guys, the heroes, versus the dragons and death dragons. And
oh, there we go. We could have like a Spelljammer / World of Kryn fusion where your player characters are hunting down poachers that are stealing dragon babies.
Any number of that would be a thing. So
that could be
Dragonlance second edition Spelljammer actually had a supplement for Kryn space, which was the area for around Kryn and its whole solar system. So it's very easy to find that material, use that material to get your guys with Spelljammer over to Dragonlance.
I think that'd be a cool place to introduce that dragon that lives in the stars.
Oh yeah,
actually in the sun. If you go out in space, you know, you're flying your Spelljammer around. Wow, this is really cool. What the hell is that?
It's coming to eat you.
It's coming right for us. Party.
So, one of the other features, in terms of cultures, because it's very dependent on what you'll find there, but of note in the setting are the Knights of Solamnia. I have a really hard time not saying Knights of Salami all the time, because it's funny to me. But the Knights of Solamnia in the earlier ages are heroes, and in the later ages they're disgraced and seen. They're treated with some contempt and fear, particularly during the War of the Lance, when some of their order at this point are now Death Knights or Liches.
Yes.
And so they were cursed in the previous ages, and then now when you encounter them in the War of the Lance period, they're definitely some evil, undead entities that are really causing a lot of problems.
Evil!
So the Knights of Solamnia would be something to pay attention to depending on the area that you jump into. Whether they're seen favorably or not in that era, what they're doing, and how they're operating. There's a cool scene where they show up in the 5th edition module, but it's later in the ages, so they're definitely seen with some skepticism and treated sort of like they're the bad guy. And then, of course, that scene ends up going sideways, so when you see it, you kind of understand what I'm talking about, but it's a neat way to introduce them. You just have to be aware of it as a game master. This group of knights and how they're treated and sort of how the populace feels about them, depending on the era that they're in. Because they used to be heroes, and now not so.
One of the storylines that Rick developed out of Dragonlance for us, because it's so much fun, he took a group of knights, and I don't remember who they were, but basically they were running around the countryside like Robin Hood, and we got hired to get him, you know, because he was an outlaw. And we didn't have dragons on our side, so it didn't work out so good. But it was an interesting concept if you think about it. You know, bandits have dragons, and it's just a full-size adult dragon.
Yep.
And plus, they have weapons that the rider of the dragon can employ as well, and that makes them a very formidable force. If you don't have weapons the like to fight them, you're going to have a bad day, and it's not going to be at all.
What happened to Fireball?
Well, you know,
Magic.
Red dragons don't care.
Oh, that's true.
Magic is a little interesting in its setup for Dragonlance in that it comes from the moons.
Mm-hmm.
3 gods that are in the form of the moons regulate magic. So that can be kind of interesting.
But it's a high magic, high fantasy world setting.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, check out the movie Dragon Slayer.
Oh yeah,
Kind of
great dragon.
Give you a feel for what's going on in the setting. Dragon Slayer, I think, would be a good example.
Oh,
It's free on Peacock. I watched it like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Jim Henson's Creature Shop does the dragon. It is excellent.
oh yeah, that's a good dragon.
So
Yeah, I mean, it's a good dragon. Like I want to look at it from a distance.
no, but when it's literally breathing fire on that guy, that was awesome.
He made a shield out of the dragon scales, which I thought was very inventive. But it only lasted like one time
Because it's dragon.
because it's dragon.
At least it worked. It did work at one time.
Yeah.
So particularly on cultures, you're going to find a lot of things. One more note about Kinder. Their communities, their country has been conquered several times. However, Troy.
So no invading army has ever stayed for longer than 2 weeks because all the Kinder now have somebody new to play with. So an invading army will come in and take over the place. They don't care. They don't have a form of government anyway.
No,
Because-
no government, no army.
Because if you had a government, that means you have an attention span of longer than 30 minutes to formulate some kind of plan to take care of the country. None of them do. They just have their little villages and they have a good time. So an invading army will come in, kill a bunch of them, take it over, and then you have a country of inquisitive 2-year-olds in the army.
Mister, what are you doing sharpening my blade? Why? Because I need it sharp. Why? Because it's my sword. Why? Okay, I'm leaving.
2 weeks is the longest time that any invading army ever stayed in the land of Kendra. I think that's just awesome.
Yeah. Definitely one of the cool, unique cultures to the Dragonlance setting. So you'll want to be sure to spend a little bit of time familiarizing yourself with that before you run even the 5e module, just so that as you encounter those elements, you can really sort of show those off to the players. It's very cool. So we'll get into a little bit of history of Dragonlance itself, then the setting. I've got.
Well, it started in 1984.
I'm talking about.
Well, I'm pretty sure it started in the first age.
Yeah, the Age of Creation. There's that one. Well, we actually I missed up a little. So, the world is Kryn, but
Yes.
typically, like the continent that we see all the adventures happen on is the continent of Ansalon. So I was mentioning that. So yeah, split into 5 ages. The first age is the time of creation when the gods are born and Kryn is formed. Followed by the Age of Dreams, is marked by rapid growth in the world's first great civilizations and the appearance of myriad new races. So beyond creation, the actual formation, primordial world setting, and all that sort of stuff. Then the gods get into, okay, now we've made man, elves, dwarves, and gnomes.
You have your first of 3 great wars between dragons and their minions. So dragons, when dragons show up, they're like, we're in charge. You guys are going to do what we say, or we're going to eat you.
Apex predator type
Absolutely.
stuff. So that's in the second age is the first major conflict between dragons and non-dragons, and it is a dragons are everywhere, massive sort of conflict. We got here the Age of Might. Yep.
The Age of Might Cataclysm obliterates
So
the Great Empire Istar.
And Istar was really interesting because it factors into the War of the Lance, but Istar builds their civilization on top of a mountain. It's a dragon burial ground. So in the lore, much like elephants have areas where they go and die, and there's elephant graveyards. Same thing here with dragons. So when you build your civilization on top of it, and dragons as an innate magical creature, you end up with a magical resonance. So the people of Ishtar decide to take their cities, use that magical resonance, and lift them into the skies. Well, that starts the Second Great Dragon War because dragons, now having their graveyards defiled, have to go and put a stop to it.
Well, we have none of that around here.
Well, not in the dead.
No.
So that is a pretty interesting period in Dragonlance history as well. because it's those events directly reshape the face of Kryn. So it's the hubris of the people of Ishtar, the Dragon War, the Knights of Solamnia are involved. This is where they fail to stop this, and eventually the mountain is dropped on Ishtar and destroys that whole section of the continent and reshapes the face of the world. That era of Dragonlance history in particular is really cool with a lot going on.
So during these wars with the dragons, mentioned a minute ago, with the rider of the dragon has a weapon called Dragonlance.
Yeah. And
I just came across a spot that says it because I remember this. Because you can't just go to the store and get a Dragonlance.
Now, Dragonlances were artifact level.
They were weapons first created in the Third Dragon War, designed with the purpose of killing evil dragons. And the only weapons that a mortal who cannot use magic can kill a dragon. Dragonlances have this power because of the way in which they are created requires the use of 2 God-blessed artifacts.
Yeah.
To make 1 Dragonlance.
And so
they're not very common.
Now, does this mention greater and lesser lances?
Greater and lesser. There are 2 sizes. Smaller footmans, yeah. And aggressive, greater.
Well, so the greater lance takes the 2 artifacts. And they are definitely the more potent, more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see those in the earlier ages more commonly. And they also have your footmans, like 6 to 9 foot. And then they've got your full-on, like, jousting style 16-foot lance to be used off the back of a dragon rider. Yeah. And that is awesome.
Yeah.
I want to be that guy.
But if you have to use 2 artifacts to make 1, that's quite... anybody out there ever seen or possessed 1 artifact? You know of the immense magic power that they can have. And the guy that owns that, he doesn't give it up willingly.
No.
So it's quite the chore to get 1.
Yeah.
But if you want to outfit an army, you're going to have a busy week.
For sure. And this, again, is where the gods of the setting are very active.
Yep, get your cleric spraying.
Definitely get your clerics praying. So, you would definitely see higher ranking or special units equipped with these lances. In the later ages, they become far rarer because no one's making them anymore. So to find one is a huge deal, particularly when we know that it's the world of Dragonlance, and dragons are going to be messing with something again anytime. So we get into, where's the 4th? We got it here. What do they call it? Oh, yes, that's right. The ever-popular Age of Despair. And this is where so the cataclysm happens and brings us into the Age of Despair. 300 years of the world has got a giant mountain dropped on its face, only then to bring us into the War of the Dragons. Sarkissis, the evil dragon queen, who we know as Tiamat, takes this opportunity to begin rallying her forces. Things begin to move in the background as everybody's recovering from the upheaval of the cataclysm. And so this is where we find the first novel. This is where we're going to enter the 5e module. Is 300 years later, when these armies are finally coalesced and convalesced, and they're starting to make their moves across the continent. And so again, that's the Age of Despair, everybody. This is how we get to go ahead and start that.
It's not what you call a vacation sunspot, but it's definitely a place you want to visit, not move to.
Yeah. Marks the War of the Lance, when Dragonlance was first introduced to Dungeons and Dragons. Events such as the Lost Wars happen. So we get the War of the Lance, the Lost Wars, and then finally, after all of that happens, we get the Age of Mortals, when everybody's conquered by dragons. You're like, oh, yeah, the Age of Mortals. No, ancient, greater dragons. Now, literally, like, this is mine. This is mine now.
Yeah.
And now you serve at their pleasure or be burned to death.
Which is probably their pleasure.
Yes. Yeah. So, yay, Age of Mortals.
So this area is now going to raise sheep because they like mutton.
For sure.
And piggies. Mm-hmm. And so then all the farmers have to do stuff to raise the food items that the dragons want. And of course, you have to give gold to them on a regular basis because dragons all like gold.
And so
They go to Vegas, I think. I'm not sure.
I don't understand. However,
They're trying to open Vegas.
Aside from the dragons being a constant threat, it's all of this upheaval also means that fighting for land and resources and other things is a constant thing that's happening. So these two clans are at war. There's a lot of things that happen between the dwarves when you get into the lore. The elves launch several gambits into different things. There's always somebody trying to find some lost or ancient power to bolster themselves or something. So it's, it says it all. The Age of Despair. Two major wars mark this period with a lot of smaller skirmishes. And it's part of the reason why we find ourselves in this era of the story is because they need heroes.
Yes.
So cue Bonnie Tyler, I need a hero, play that for this section.
Well,
and
that's what a D&D character is.
it's what you're meant to be, yeah.
You are the hero to save the day and
that-
keep the downtrodden populace from being eaten by dragons
And
or whoever.
it's definitely a feature, I think, of Hickman's work in particular, Ravenloft and Dragonlance. A little darker, a lot of oppression or suppression, and they need a hero. They need something to rise up and provide relief. And that's one of the things that makes these so epic in their stories. It's a lot of fun when you get that Lord of the Rings, that big, we have 10,000 dragons show up at some point. You're like, well, dragons, oh crap, what do we do? Well, we fight them.
Well,
And it's awesome. And there's you can actually have that fight. You can actually be successful. And you can, it's not going to be easy, but that is some of the features of Dragonlance. It's a big epic story in this high fantasy, high magic setting.
Lord of the Rings had armies of 10, 20, 50,000 orcs.
Yeah.
Dragonlance just uses dragons, which I think is far more scary.
Well, like as you were saying, in Greyhawk, one dragon shows up, it's a bad day. Well, what happens when 10,000 show up?
Yeah.
Oh,
And they all have some crazy sorcerer on the back of one.
Cue Monty Python, run away!
Yeah.
Yes.
Here's a quick bit of trivia there, Mr. Producer. Do you know the difference between a dragon and a wyvern?
Yeah, dragons have 4 legs, wyverns do not.
There you go.
They have wings instead of
So-
arms in the front.
Yeah.
Like a T-Rex.
Yeah. Well, no, on their
Yeah,
wing.
It's on their wing.
Yeah.
What you would see with like a bat.
Yeah.
So if its arms or its wings, that's a wyvern. If it has 4 limbs and wings, that's a dragon.
Plus, I'm not sure if they have the different metallic and chromatic types for wyverns.
No
I know there's a
wings-
different few
no wings, it's
species,
from
I guess.
China. No wings, it's from China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a luck dragon.
Yeah.
There's that. Falcon. Anyway,
It's a wyvern, which in and of itself is not something just to be scoffed at.
no,
A full-size adult one will give you a bad day as well.
for sure. But they are typically seen serving dragons or as part of the evil armies. They're highly desirable because they're a large, intelligent beast. Not necessarily something you can have a conversation with, but something that you can train and say, go eat that guy, and it will.
Yeah. So the dragon in Dragon Slayer was actually a wyvern.
Yeah.
Not a dragon. But it was still a badass monster.
Yeah, you don't want it's going to eat you, and it
Yeah.
breathes fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as far as some of the other things that we're going to see, I think this is a good time to mention it here in the histories. One of the things that has always plagued the races of Kryn are the Draconians.
Yes.
So Draconians are not Dragonborn. Draconians are taken. So first you have to go capture the egg of a good dragon.
Good
Then-
luck.
Then
Yeah.
you perform some ancient evil magic rituals to corrupt it. And from there you'll get 8 to 12 Draconians hatch out of this egg. And they're humanoid with wings, sort of dragon humanoids. Depending on the egg that's stolen, I got some information here. We have 5 different kinds of Draconian. So it's not just that there's a Draconian, but you can run into some different kinds, similar to Dragonborn, in that we have their heritage makes a difference. But they're always treated poorly. They're used as shock troops and slaves, and so even from birth, they're this maltreatment gives them a bad disposition. Particularly with humans being the majority race of the setting, they learn to hate humans and humanoids very quickly. and when they're unleashed upon your cities, they take that malice out, in
They're
most brutal
very
fashion.
brutal, yeah.
And so the Draconians were always something to be feared and to be wary of. Unlike Dragonborn were introduced into D&D's 4th edition. They are natives to the world of Aver, which was Toral's twin, and during the Spell Plague, when they came together, Dragonborn were now able to be deposited, and eventually through the events of the Spell Plague, as those worlds separated, we now have a large amount of Dragonborn that were left behind in Faerun. And so they are not Draconians, they are a different race, they are not inherently evil. Draconians, on the other hand, inherently evil because of the process that creates them and the way that they're brought up. So they are a little different. Of note, though, I want to be cautious. If you're grabbing some of the old material to expand on your Dragonlance game after you've played through the 5e module, if you're true to the world setting, you may find that Dragonborn players will have a more difficult time, in that there's going to be a lot of distrust around that character until they can prove themselves. I wouldn't go so far as to have outright racism or hostility or things like that, where it makes the game just unnecessary. It's no fun. But if you're truer to the setting, a Dragonborn player or character that shows up in that setting is going to find that he may have a more difficult time, just because Draconians are a feature. They've always harassed and harried the people. They're always evil, and they're always something that you see on the sides of the people coming to burn your house down.
Yeah.
But
they look the same.
Yeah.
The average person, they look the same.
Yeah, you're not going to take it. You're like, oh, the Dragonborn over there doesn't have a tail or wings. It looks like a dragon. One of the other things, races of Kryn, lizardmen.
Yep.
Yes.
They look very similar to the Draconians, I think, because the Dragonborn, more dragony, big horns, that kind of stuff.
So
the lizard folk are more like...
They're going to be more gecko-y.
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
typically...
They're killer croc.
Yeah, or kind of like your iguanas, right?
Yeah.
But when you see them from 100 feet away, you don't know the difference.
Right.
Lizardmen have always been an antagonistic evil race in Kryn as well. When we find lizardmen in Spelljammer, they're also highly intelligent, highly organized, and they are the ones that came from Kryn. Yeah. So you're going to find lizardmen will be a larger feature as far as the monstrous races that you could encounter in Dragonlance, as opposed to where we might be fighting orcs more often in Faerun and that sort of stuff. So again, a Dragonborn character may find that there's some confusion there that could cause them some issues. Obviously, it's very easy to ignore all of these features of the setting and just have a good game and let your players play whatever.
Really cool.
For sure. Just keep in mind that some of the older material, if you're going to use it, may have story themes in that direction, and be cautious of it as you include those in your game. You don't want to alienate any of your players. However, a little bit of adversity like that can really allow that player to rise to that challenge, have some really good role play, and come out as a player as well as a character.
Because besides the regular populace seeing him as somebody to be feared or hated,
right,
the guards of the town may think that he is an escaped convict. He's a soldier that went AWOL.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of possibilities with the story that you're writing.
Even when your Dragonborn shows up in full plate mail with a holy symbol on the front of it, in this setting, you may find that he's going to have a different reception. Again, that's if you're being truer to the older material. You may find that those themes, if you're using that material, will need to be addressed through your game if you have Dragonborn players. However, there's no reason not to play them. Again, don't include those. Don't alienate your players if it's going to cause a problem. It's a really cool module, and so it might be neat to actually have a heroic metallic bloodline Dragonborn go and try to redeem or protect, and so you can then further the themes of good metallic, evil chromatic, and
that he could be trying to save or protect an area. Maybe there's an orphanage.
Yeah.
Orphanages always need protecting.
Or it's from the brood of some ancient metallic that says, hey, I'm tired of this.
It's a bunny hospital.
Yeah.
Redeeming his family name.
For sure.
There's just a number of things that you can come up with to make the story fit.
We just wanted to be sure to mention it, particularly when we were talking about Spelljammer. If you bring those characters over from Faerun, there's a good chance you're going to have a Dragonborn or two, and just address the themes as appropriate for your players, and make sure that the game stays fun.
Yeah, definitely.
So a little bit here about the Draconians. We have the Aurak. These are the rarest, and they were hatched from golden dragon eggs, and the only Draconians without wings. So again, we're already having some, Draconian without rings.
Oh yeah, now he looks more Dragonborn. Yeah.
Let's see, 7 feet tall. They're most intelligent, and
mostly.
Yeah.
So they can be mistaken for lizardmen or your Dragonborn.
Yeah. This one didn't have any information about what their coloring was. I'm assuming they're goldish. So most intelligent, cunning, and fearsome. Rely on their magical powers rather than fight with melee weapons.
They can dimension door up to 6 feet away.
Yeah.
So.
You'll find a lot more magic here. The Boz, smallest of the Draconians and hatched from brass dragon eggs, are used as ground troops, often abused and treated as slaves by others because they are the weakest of the Draconians. Now, again, relative weakest as the Draconians still means that they're going to cause a lot of problems for your regular townspeople.
Yeah.
So don't let that description mislead you. Small wings Baz are able to flap their wings, allowing them to run fast. However, they're not able to fly. Bozak, created from the eggs of bronze dragons, most well known for their leadership and understanding of warfare. And then gifted with magic, not as gifted as Aurak. So not capable of true flight either. There's one. So they do have huge wings. Their bones explode after death.
Wow.
So they shrapnel.
So the Bozak have favorite spells to use.
Yeah.
Burning Hands, Enlarge, Magic Missile, Shocking Grasp, Invisibility, Levitate, and Stinking Cloud, and Web.
And there's a whole army of these guys.
Yeah, so go back a couple of lines. You said not as powerful as
the Aurak. So
these guys have all these spells.
Yeah, and they're not considered as powerful.
Right. Just keep that in mind. And yes, there's a whole bunch of... So far, what I'm hearing that disturbs me the most about them is that they're made from gold dragon and brass dragon. And those are lawful good dragons.
Right, again, so you have... There's forces out there that are finding these nests, stealing these eggs, conducting these rituals, and they'll hatch 8 to 12 of these at a time from one egg. So if they get more than one egg, you can end up with 50 Draconians of a particular kind very quickly. And when you supplement your army with a ton of Draconians that can cast magic, are physically formidable, intelligent, very ruthless in the way that they prosecute their warfare, it's one of those things that really sort of amps up the danger. Even if you have a smaller force, you have a small force of really potent bad guys.
There's one step in the process that you described that is included here that was not included there. So I don't know if they're editing this out because it sounds kind of horrific. However, so the corruption of the eggs is the work of an evil triad. That means 3 guys. Walrus, the cleric, Drakehart, a mage, and an ancient red dragon named Harkael, the bender. So this dragon actually has a name, which means it has a certain level of intelligence. And
he's old enough to have been doing this. So yeah.
So hold on, not only that, but you got to remember that in D&D, whenever you have a character, you have a monster, it gives you a monster stat. And then if you have a named creature, it's way, way worse. Yes. It's like, oh, who's that? It's like, oh, no, he's just some pit demon. Well, who's this guy? Well, that's Zaziel the Torturer. He's still a pit demon, but it's way worse.
Keep in mind here, too, that this is just the triad they're responsible during the War of the Lance era, here at the beginning of the Age of Despair. Though the Red Dragon may have been responsible for this for much longer.
Yeah, so Red Dragon, named creature.
But these 3 are the primary troop responsible for building the ranks of the Draconians for the Dragon Army during the War of the Lance.
So through arcane spells, they cause the eggs to grow and their occupants to multiply. Then Warlish opens the gate to the abyss and the Abshi, the Dark Queen's minions, rush forth to inhabit the new bodies. Draconians are creatures of magic origin, and when they are slain, the odd enchantments that form them create spectacular death scenes. Each race dies differently.
Yeah, so for example, the Bozak, their bones explode. Others may become large mounds of acid, or
they're possessed from the day before they're born.
From creatures of the abyss. Yeah,
Yeah. So they're not only dragons; they're dragons possessed by demons.
Yeah.
right. And,
Which I think that explains why they're evil.
for sure. The other type here, Capac. Draconians are the result of corrupting the eggs of copper dragons. Much like other Draconians who prefer to be around their race only, unique in the fact that they have venom glands in their mouths. Oh yeah, now we have giant dragons that can...
They can induce paralysis in somebody
Yeah.
for 2d6 turns.
When they die, they dissolve into seething potent acid.
Just like those damn aliens.
Most known for serving the White Dragon High Lord Feelfast during the War of the Lance. In the frozen and barren land of ice. So it's frozen, barren, you've got Draconians that melt.
With poison and acid.
So those are the Capex, right?
That was the Capex,
Okay.
and the last one here I got is the Seavac.
Yes. They're special.
They are. So, unique among their races, they're the only ones capable of flight. And due to this upside, they're often employed by their commanders as scouts.
Yep.
But you could also encounter them in an aerial combat as supporters to a dragon rider.
So there's one other thing. I don't know.
Yeah, when they die, these creatures mimic the shape of whoever killed them. And worthy Civacs include Rag and Slitheth. So they've even got some named variations here.
Yeah.
But how crazy is that? Haha, I killed it. Oh, dude, it looks like me. And then a version of you is dead on the battlefield. Or it turns out there's like 20 of you dead on the battlefield if you're that cool.
So something else that you
Seavac,
overlooked. Seavacs are shapeshifters.
Oh, shapeshifters in
Capable
general.
of changing their form under two specific conditions. When they slay a humanoid of its size or smaller, it can take the form of its victim.
Okay.
The Seavac does not gain its memories or experience or anything. It just looks like you. And it's an easy way you can be found out.
If now you've got a whole bunch of these guys that can T-1000 their way into enemy lines.
Yeah.
They insert themselves with a refugee population,
Yep.
only to later start causing havoc within the city walls.
Or they open the gates.
Yeah, and as note, they're born from the eggs of silver dragons.
See, those are all lawful good dragons.
But
This
this
is
is
so corrupted
By demons.
by demons.
yeah. But this is again.
That's
So
what you get.
the themes of it, right? So aside from dragons, the good metallic dragons and the evil chromatic dragons. And so while the evil chromatic dragons could spawn more dragons and things like that, somebody along the way was like, you know what? I hate those guys so much. I'm going to turn their children into my foot soldiers.
What would happen if we took one of its eggs and listen to me now? Let's go with me on this. We're going to do this.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do this to it. And then we're going to do this.
So first we're gonna open a portal to hell. Why? And then we're gonna steal a dragon age. Why?
Yeah, because we're Wayland Yutani and we like messing with things. And we're gonna go
Right.
yeah. But I'll just note that on the cover here
Oh, yeah.
is a lich.
Yes, it is.
So you've got that kind of stuff roaming around here too. You got that 2E Adventures pulled up.
I'm doing it right now.
Yeah, thanks there, Mr. Producer. But boom, there it is. Yeah.
With big, giant wings.
Yeah. I forget which character that's supposed to be there.
Was it like a draconian that turned into a lich? Because that would be bad.
Yeah, we don't need that happening.
That would be awful.
There's
Yeah.
enough Death Knights and things happening. But, there's just a lot that's going on in the setting. So we've got, here he is. I've got my
Let me
crown.
see the.
Actually, read the back of it. It may give you some ideas on the art, but it's,
Oh, it looks like the wings are on the chair,
yeah,
but these guys look like they're working together.
they were. That's the other thing,
So
too.
is the lich evil? Aren't they all evil?
The Lich is always
I
evil.
don't know.
The Lich is always evil.
But there's also, it's who can get power at the time, and this is part of the reason why there's so much turmoil in like Kryn or in Dragonlance setting, is those alliances are always temporary. There's always a knife in the back, and there's always another thing to be taken, destroyed, or captured.
Always.
So it just requires additional, vigilance on the part of the heroes. But it also means that as an adventure setting from a game master's perspective, there's always something that you can be doing, always another mystery to uncover, another plot to foil, people that need help. So there's quite a lot that's going on that you can take advantage of. When it comes to governments, some of the things that, as long as they're still standing and they haven't been burned down by dragons yet, you're going to find a lot of, there's definitely some feudalism, but it's definitely patterned after that European sort of thing, where you've got a lot of city-states or small kingdoms if they can manage to hold on to enough power. And even if you've got a city-state and you've got a fishing village down the way, their mayor and the 20 acres around the town or whatever is their government, and everything out that is the wilds. And then you manage to go down the road or take a boat down the river, then you get into the large city, and they might have a lord in charge, but he's basically the mayor of the large city and its surrounding lands. And so you'll end up with this sort of feudalism or this
several small city-states.
It's going to be a feature of a lot of what you find, particularly during the Age of Despair. So during the Age of Mortals, it's whichever dragon has conquered your area. And then before that, you will have the rise and fall of kingdoms, particularly like we talked about Ishtar, in that northeast corner before they get mountained.
Mountain. What a way to call it.
But they were a theocracy, and the guy at the head of that declared himself a god, which is one of the things that earned the
and then the gods are like, let me show you what a god can do.
Yeah. So you will find theocracies and things like that periodically, but more often than not, while magic is strong, and fairly pervasive, it's not like you have mages that set up towers. They're not necessarily interested in running cities. You'll find a lot of the knights and lords and nobility playing in the courts and dealing with different,
There's pretty much so much fighting going on everywhere between the city-states and what tries to be countries.
Yeah.
Where you have lords trying to become kings and taking over larger territories.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they just can't hold on to it for very long because a group of dragons comes by and says, no, we're in charge.
It's one of those things, too, that can be very interesting from a story standpoint. If you're trying to get your players, if you want to have something that's more of a court intrigue game, is taking treaties, forging treaties, getting help, getting the support of your army to help me and these other two guys fend off the blue dragon army, because the red dragon army's up there.
And how do you do that? Very simply. Your first and third level characters, you want to throw them face first in Dragonlance. So this noble, he writes a letter of treaty and assistance to the guy next door, which is really 100 miles away. And he hires them to take the treaty
as couriers.
Take this and go over there. So they're FedEx.
I can't send one of my guys wearing my banner because there's too many of the other nobles, too many eyes on this, too many whatever.
Take this, and if you're captured, destroy it.
Yeah.
So this needs to go to this guy so he can sign it, then bring it back to me immediately so I can see his signature. And then I know that we have an alliance. I can count on him for the upcoming battle. So now they are involved with what's going on.
One of the other things that you'll see a lot of, and is particularly features in the 5e module, mercenary companies.
Oh, sure.
So, because there's so much strife and conflict, there's a lot of opportunity for a good mercenary band to make a lot of money.
Yep. Well, another thing that I've seen more with Dragonlance than some of the other like Faerun content that I've seen is that Dragonlance the fights there seem to be meant to be a lot more epic.
Oh yeah,
right?
It's field battles. It's not 10 guys.
It's not. I have a group of adventurers and we're gonna go explore this dungeon. No, it's I'm here at this castle and there's 10,000 dragons on their way.
Yeah, you're manning a catapult. You're
much more epic.
Riding a dragon.
The game we played with Rick. By the time we were, I think, around 7th level, we had probably 50 hirelings.
Yeah,
and we had several wagons. I think we had like 7 or 8 wagons. And they all had a ballista in them.
Oh, yeah.
And
you're fighting dragons.
That's dragons. But our job, after a while, we were being hired as a mercenary type group,
Mm-hmm.
but we were like, go hunt down this one guy, and
Sure.
he's known to travel with 12 dragons in his group.
Right.
Yeah.
You're trying to get the enemy lords that are building their alliances and folding into their army.
But man, you have one battle go bad, you're like rethinking your whole life.
First time a 1 comes up, you're like, all right, guys, we probably need to leave.
Well, you don't want to see you don't want to roll a 1 when it's your ballista that's firing.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have that snap in half.
Oh yeah, it's done. It broke. Something broke, and it's done for the battle.
Yeah.
You're like, what?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. First time a 1 comes up, you're like, all right, guys, we should leave.
Because we would do. Rick came up with a pretty awesome alternative to some of the combat rules.
Right, something that for the large field type
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
So we have one dragon coming in at us,
Mm-hmm.
and he would let us roll like one roll. So we're gonna fire 7 ballista at him,
Right.
right?
And that roll would represent an average effectiveness.
Because we're gonna shoot a volley,
Yeah.
and he would let us shoot our volleys at +4s.
Oh, cool.
So it's +4 that one of them is gonna hit.
Sure. The probabilities.
And then it was all percentages. He had a percentage chart that he made that was just, you can make that just real quick.
Cool.
And instead of hitting it with 1, we could hit it with as many as all of them. We never did. We hit it 2 or 3. But if you could hit the dragon twice with 3 arrows or ballista bolts each time, it wasn't flying anymore. It was on the ground.
And
No,
on the ground,
a down dragon is a dead dragon.
you can kill it on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the
Most
things
of the time.
I want to mention, Troy, you said 7th level. For those of
Yeah.
you who have not played 1st and 2nd edition, by the time you made 9th level, the game system anticipated that you were building a castle of your own. You had your own guys. You were, establishing lands, because the system was much more deadly and the progression was a lot slower. So,
It was.
what you're talking about might be more appropriate for a level 12,
Yeah,
5th edition.
10 to 15, somewhere in there, yeah.
Right, so the higher level stuff, when you have your whole big band and you are the HMFIC,
Well,
and can hold your own against a dragon.
We've done other shows, in particular when we go out to some of the game stores.
Yeah.
And we'll pull out the 5th edition monster manual with the 1st edition monster manual and compare them straight across.
Yep.
And some of those 5th edition players that only played 5th edition, they go, that's an orc.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
you don't. Yeah, 1st edition, 2nd edition orcs, trolls.
Oh,
No, thank
dude.
you. I'm out.
I ran a game
Ogres.
Friday, and it was a group of 6 guys, and I told them all to be 6 to 8, right? First encounter was 2 bugbears. 6 level 6 to 8 characters still had an issue with 2
Yeah.
3rd edition bugbears.
They're
Yeah,
no
because you
joke.
pull the.
Because
well,
that's the book I had on me. So I pulled my 3rd edition monster manual and pulled out my bugbears, and they are no joke.
Yeah, the 3rd edition in particular got extra spicy because of how broken it was.
Yeah.
But even when you go back in the editions, the game was a little more difficult in certain aspects.
Yeah.
And then I know when we've compared dragons, adult red dragons side by side,
Yes.
2nd edition dragons are way scarier, just because they account for the 9 attacks they can do around.
Well, they have multiple attacks they can do in a round, but I've actually given little classes on how many dragons or how many attacks a dragon can do, and it's a total of 12 different forms of attack.
If you guys
They
want to
can't do
see,
them all in one round and be glad they can't,
sure.
but they can do 12 different types of attacks.
If you guys want to see that, leave us a comment, and we'll get Troy to run you through how to run a dragon to kill your party every time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It can be pretty brutal because,
Yeah.
especially in Faerun and Greyhawk, when a dragon did show up, as we mentioned, it was sort of a big deal. It was a big epic thing. You're going to, like, when a big dragon shows up in Dragonlance, it's still a big deal. And so you're going to be fighting more of the wyvern and smaller dragons, but it's meant to be more epic. But you can still run those dragons to be very deadly. You can, get across to your players that what you're dealing with is on a different level than what you're used to.
Yeah.
And so if you want to see Troy put that together, let us know and leave us a comment below.
So,
Commerce.
commerce. You want to
So-
buy a dragon?
No.
I got one you want an egg.
So we talked a little bit about the government styles you're going to see as
Yes.
you're traversing the world of Kryn.
Yeah.
Commerce is one of those things that with constant warfare can be a bit tricky. The coins that you have that were minted, that village burned down last week, and their money's not good anymore.
And you've traveled, and unknowingly, you've crossed a border somewhere. Now you're in a different kingdom, and just by having
Currency of the enemy.
currency of the enemy, exactly, And like, oh, you must be, or if you're not of the enemy's army, you must be a spy or a mercenary to have accepted money from them.
Which is why you need to have several different types of currency, so that way, even if you are a spy, you're like, no, I'm a merchant.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. What's the name? Born.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta have a Born identity box. You have your different passports, and different bags of money. Yeah, Jason Bourne. You got to have all that money set aside, like James Bond, too. You know?
Yep.
We've talked about these sorts of complications that economics can bring up in a couple of our other Through the Ages videos. Particularly, we had a good conversation with Nathaniel in Ravenloft. And you're like, Ravenloft currency was actually really interesting, the way that they handle money.
Well, even Katie with the mermaid stuff was pretty cool.
Yeah. So check out some of that. I don't want to drag it out too much here. But it can be another way to cause complication. Either the money, that country doesn't exist anymore, exchange rates, taxes, are you part of the enemy? Are you a spy? These sorts of things, just for the money you carry on you because of the nature of the setting, can cause you some sort of issues. But it makes great story hooks if you're trying to get your players to go over here. If you can be found and arrested and brought over here, oh, it was a big misunderstanding, but now you're in the city I need you to be in. Dang it.
You can even, say you wind up in a war-torn land.
Yeah.
And you have a bag of gold, you put it on the table. It's no longer valuable because they don't have an economy anymore.
Yeah, they can't spend it.
They can't spend it.
Like,
so what they want is they need magical assistance of some kind.
Or trade goods. I need crossbows. I need swords. I need armor. I need I need a wagon.
A bag of gold. You can buy those things.
I'll take that bag of jerky you've got because I haven't eaten in 3 days.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. I'll take your food. Give me your boots.
I'll take that bag of gold and then I'll start buying stuff off of you.
But when you have a war-torn land, just because you're wealthy is pointless because there's no place to spend it. Because the things that are important to that place now are not a bag of gold. They need healing, they need food, they need a number of things, and none of them a bag of gold is going to solve because their marketplace.
Yeah, at least not today.
Yeah.
Their marketplace is just.
They'll have to go to the next town over and back again, and it'll be a week before they get breakfast.
Exactly. So just because your player characters are rich, let them know that that's not everything.
For sure. And beyond that, when you're dealing with economics at sort of the more macro scale, these guys have fish, but they need timber because they're building siege weapons or reinforcing the palisade walls.
Oh, sure.
The dwarves with their minerals and things. You're going to have a lot of those needs will be different based on the era that you're in and who's doing what where. So, as steels and things, weapons, armor, always in high demand. Stone may be more readily available and more desirable in certain areas.
Especially like cut stone where you can fit it to the walls and stuff.
For sure. Yeah, I have stone blocks in my pocket.
Masonry,
back of holding.
This sort of economics, this sort of commerce is going to be different than what you might see in Forgotten Realms, where Neverwinter and Baldur's Gate have their different trade goods, and their relationship is going to be not the same as this walled city that has to defend itself against different attacks all the time. So what they need and how they prosecute, just letting people in or out, and then how they do trade can be a lot different.
So when you're designing your story, I know it's kind of a much, but try to keep all of that in mind. And so when your characters finally do get some money, you find other ways to take it from them.
Even if it's just a single item, right? Like, we, what was the one? Vikings. At a certain point, Lagatha is going to wall their trade city, right? Well, they suddenly had a huge demand for lumber and large cut trees, lumber. And so if you show up with your fish, well, they're a fishing village in the first place. That's not got a whole lot of value. But if you could show up with a wagon load of cut trees, suddenly they want to talk to you.
Yep.
And so even if it's a single item like that in the economy, it can really change or bring that world setting, that area to life, right? These guys have a problem. This one particular thing is going to help them fix it. And that can help you establish that setting or that region. As your characters move from place to place and they go through the story, you can see how the events of the world setting are affecting these different places through commerce, what's rare, what's needed, what's available. Whether or not money is going to be something that they take into account.
They may already have trade goods that they grow. It could be crops, it could be animals. They could have people that make barrels.
Sure.
They got people that make cloth, and so those trade goods in that area, you're always going to have bandits or somebody trying to make a bigger deal and steal this or sell that, or just keep all of that kind of stuff in mind, because when you build your economy in your world, there's a lot of things there that are fluid.
For sure.
So they move around a lot.
But to Troy's point, those are also things that will need to be protected sometimes.
Yes.
And so, why are we going out to this village 40 miles out here? Well, it happens to be the one place where they're still growing grain right now. And winter is coming. So
winter is coming.
It's always, probably one of the most important lessons of Game of Thrones. We've always got, like, whatever else is happening, the planet's going to kick your butt. So
yeah.
That can be a way to move your players around, is we've got these resources that need to be protected.
That goes back to the oldest one. One of the oldest jobs that D&D characters had. You walk in there, and you can almost always get a job as a caravan guard.
Yep.
To protect it on the way there and back from bandits.
Yep.
So there's bandits because I got a job to protect this caravan from them, and there's trade goods being bought and sold and going on this route, that we have an economy. So just the fact that you can find that job just says a whole lot about the economy of that area.
For sure.
So keep that all in your story. Tie it in somehow.
Well, not to mention just even the dangers of the area that are associated with that economy.
Well, this is
like
where
your bandits. What kind of bandits? How many? That kind of stuff.
Now we've got the world setting, right? We want to introduce the Draconians. We run across some Draconian scouts. Now we've got this happening, and we've got to bring this information over to these guys when we get to the town. So as far as the commerce goes, it's along the lines of your standard high fantasy D&D setting. They didn't do anything too radically different in the setting, but because of the certain challenges that are there, commerce can be an interesting hook to get your characters to move along the world setting, bring them into the areas that you need them to be, or introduce certain story elements that might otherwise be just, you get attacked. Well, okay, you get attacked, but why? Or how? In what context? What information can you then put into that encounter that moves your players further in the story? And you can do a lot of that through commerce, trade, the nobility, cutting different deals, or alliances.
I think that, commerce works pretty much everywhere. It serves as a story in and of itself, or it can anyway.
Yeah.
If you're trying to come up with a new storyline, if you just look at the world setting, and you're like, okay, in that world setting, they do this and this and this, and you can describe, just looking at it, in yours anyway, the government that has to be in place, and then what kind of commerce is there, and that commerce will describe everything from grains that are grown, the animals that are raised, textiles that are made, wood that's being worked, for what purpose, and now you have your whole economy, and now you just got to figure out a way to put the good guys in there and the bad guys on the other side.
Yeah, particularly when you're creating your own world setting, there's a lot you can learn from the Dragonlance setting if you need to have one country or a set of countries at war, and the different conditions you're going to find in that country or those two countries, the toll that it's going to take on those economies versus its neighbors that may be more stable and around that sort of as you develop your own setting, your own storylines. Dragonlance can be a good place to find those more strife or more troubled areas. You can pull some elements.
The economy of the countryside is one of the first few things that suffers the most damage from a large-scale conflict, regardless of who it is. Look at World War II.
We bombed industrial.
And now you can't get milk.
Yeah.
It's just a number of things. So try to keep little things like that in mind, because it's going to be a domino effect. But especially if you have a large-scale war going on, it'd be down to the point where we can no longer get medicine. We can no longer get this food item.
Well, not only that, but it'll drive the price of everything up.
Everything goes up in wartime.
Yeah, like they blew up the oil fields, so now I don't have gas. I can't transport the cows over to Hawaii so you can have a steak today. So that's why your steak is $20, sir.
This is big.
It is. So try to keep all those kind of things in the back of your mind when you're putting your story together on your world setting.
So when we get into Dragonlance, as we teased a little bit earlier, Dragonlance has some very cool magic items specific to Dragonlance.
Dragon orbs.
I'm pretty sure the 2000 D&D movie was based off of Dragonlance because he had that rod that would control dragons.
There is a Rod of Dragon Command, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. Well,
until the red dragon turned it off, of course, and then ate him.
If I have an army of dragons, I want to make sure I can control them. I don't want them just coming out to the battlefield and then flying away home. I need them to destroy the opposing army. So now they have to make all these different items to control dragons. Well, what adventurer doesn't want to have one?
Right? I want to ride in on dragon.
For sure. So, yeah, the dragon orbs in particular are ancient artifacts that can control armies worth of dragons at a time.
Yes.
The rods were could help you with more powerful, specific dragons or a small group of dragons. But if you had control of a dragon orb, you were really a big deal at that point. You either keep them out of your area or command the dragons as your thralls to go and cause problems for your neighbors.
By keeping them out of your area.
Pretty much.
That was one of our later quests when we were in Kryn. There was a powerful wizard had built a tower, and he was collecting. He wanted all of them up on not on the roof, but in the top floor of his tower. He had a table, and it had cutouts, and the orbs were sitting on this table, glowing. So dragons that it controlled, the color that it controlled, could not get near his tower to attack him. So if you had a dragon army, you weren't going to attack this guy.
No.
You had to come in on foot.
Yep.
And he had other defenses for that. But he was hiring us to go get dragon orbs. And the first time we were like, oh, dragon orb. It's like a magic crystal ball for dragons. Sure, we can go get you one. Little did we know that the people that already have them, they're kind of fond of them. And they don't want to give them up. So we did manage to get 2 of them, though, before we moved on to something else.
You were just like, this is too difficult. We're not doing it anymore.
Yeah, we're not doing it. Well, because, like the first one was in a cave that had ancient dragons in it, and it's like, it was horrible.
So we talked a little bit earlier about the Dragonlances.
Well, yeah, the dragons don't want you to have those.
No.
But then there were the Dragonlances themselves, for which the setting is named, designed specifically to help destroy and defeat evil dragons. That required the use of 2 artifacts to make a greater, or 1 artifact would make a lesser Dragonlance, and they came in a couple different flavors, more available in earlier times, less available in the War of the Lance era, and typically...
So what you're leading up to, you're talking about tech. You're taking stuff and making stuff out of stuff.
Well, who's really good at it?
Dwarves?
Tinker Gnome!
Gnomes?
The Tinker Gnome. And the
Tinker Gnome!
So not just gnomes, but we have the Tinker Gnome.
I love those guys.
And I didn't mention them earlier because I wanted to save them for now. So gnomes have always had that sort of like alchemy, science-y vibe to them. In this setting in particular, the Tinker Gnome builds all of the weapons of war, all the crazy inventions. They are the precursor to what we saw in Eberron, which was the Artificer. The Artificer takes magic and tech and combines it in very cool ways, where the Tinker Gnome does clockwork, steam power, and really cool stuff like that. So some of the inventions of the gnomes, the net flinger, the gnome flinger, yes, it will actually fling gnomes for you. The flapestry, short for flying tapestry, was originally designed to send moving paintings and sound over tremendous distances. One of the things you actually get very early on in the 5th edition module is essentially a cell phone, but it's a gnomish device. Man, they run out of stuff here. The Blam Blower was designed as a portable device that does damage to foes at a distance. It's a small bazooka.
Yep.
The Blam Blower. So,
Blam!
A lot of very fun names and things in the gnomish style. But where you have wizards, like I mentioned earlier, they're not very common, but magic is very potent. And magic, in terms of items and its use, is very prevalent in the setting. You're also going to find a lot of that clockwork sort of technology. Gunpowder is not widely used, but you will find it in some of the gnomish inventions. And gnome craftsmen are highly sought after by the lords of Kryn to bolster their defenses and develop the weapons of war required to be able to defend themselves or attack their neighbors, whatever you happen
Yeah,
to
I
have.
mean, gnomes are smart, but they're not French. They could get a trebuchet if they wanted to.
For sure. And that gets into all the crazy different wizards.
Yes, I still say that trebuchet is a French word that means knock it down.
They're pretty good at it.
It was
And then I want to circle back real quick. I happened to find a map from later in the ages.
Hey, where did all of that go?
There you
Wasn't
go.
there landmass up there?
So if you could help me out there, Mr. Producer, the dark spot
Right
used
there?
to be Ishtar. And now it's a giant swirling mass of God
Yeah,
exploded
and
by a
then-
mountain.
There's this river here, these rivers here,
Yeah.
right? Kind of divide the land further.
I'm trying to find that earlier map because
Basically turned the continent into a archipelago.
yeah, it really did. It smashed it up good. Troy, where was that map you had in here earlier?
In there, it's that one. No,
Yeah.
it's in there somewhere. It's in the middle of the book,
Group of islands.
near the middle of the book.
Near the middle. Searching.
So it's talking about Kinder and their lack of fear of anything.
Yeah.
There's a picture of one talking with two Lithians.
Oh.
Oh,
Just
you
have
guys,
an afternoon conversation.
you guys eat brains? What's that taste like?
I can't find the picture of the Tinker Gnome because the Tinker Gnome has a leather armor with pockets and stuff, tools hanging all over it. It actually has a +2 to his armor class.
Gnomes average 3 feet in height and weigh about 40 to 50 pounds. Females are as large as males.
Yep.
All gnomes have rich brown skin, either straight or curly white hair, china blue or violet eyes, and surprisingly even cavity-free teeth. So, gnomes sound much like humans in vocal range and pitch, except for having a more nasally voice. Involved in major industrial operations and may develop industrial diseases from smog and other working hazards. So, specific things that you'll find with gnomes. Those diseases could be another hook that you could use to introduce them or some of their specific problems to the setting. Gnomish history is the most detailed of any of the races of Krins. It is the most inexplicable and boring stuff you could ever be forced to read. So maybe we're not going to get to that. But
Kind of like that one race from Hitchhiker's Guide, their poetry.
Yeah, there he is. There he is.
yeah, and so
There. You gotta put that up there.
we can get that up there best we can there, Mr. Producer.
He's over there.
Yeah,
He's over there.
yeah.
Right here. Why don't
Try
I
to
just...
get him in front of the penguin.
Do camera number.
Oh, the other one. Yeah, watch
that
out.
one.
So thank you there, Mr. Producer.
Yep.
So this is what Troy was talking about. This guy has so many tools, devices, and other things in his armor. Well, that really it is his armor. He doesn't have armor outside of the pouches and things to hold all of his stuff, but he's covered in wrenches and things to the point that if you try to hit him with something, the wrenches and tools are going to deflect that as an armor would.
And it counts as leather armor with a +2 bonus because of all the tools on it.
Right, so it bumps it up slightly, not as a magical +2, but as a +2 extra protective leather.
Yeah.
But Tinker Gnomes are a large feature, and so are their devices. So when we talk about some of the high magic stuff, you're going to see both gnomes, technology, and magic throughout all the ages of Kryn. So it's not like they suddenly developed industry in the middle of the series. They've been there since the beginning, and any sort of weird gnomish device. An artificer class as a gnome works really well. In this, they fit the theme correctly. So if you played a gnomish artificer in your 5th edition adventure, they're going to find a home in Kryn very, very easily. They're going to have a lot of respect. Their devices, like I said, are sought after, and a big feature of
That'd be
setting.
that'd be an interesting party dynamic. You go into a city that's in the middle of this dragon war, and you have a gnome artificer standing next to a dragonborn.
Oh, that would be cool.
That would raise some questions. That'd be cool.
I had a player who had a Tinker Gnome in one of my Planescape games years ago, and they actually played a night when we were doing the Modern March, and so all these Moderns, which are metal creatures,
Yeah, so you'll find them in the monster manual in 5th edition. They're really cool. Clockwork, animatron.
They're even actually in the DMG because there's a small Planescape section.
So so they came across all of these, and the Tinker Gnome, he just started tinkering.
Over there, Troy.
I'm over there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So he just started tinkering and started healing the Modrons and bringing them back to life.
Yeah, he's just fixing it.
And he was just fixing it. He's like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. So he breaks out his wrenches, a little blowtorch. He's doing this and that, fixing it. Well, the Modrons were picking him up like a hero because he was healing them all.
He was bringing them back from the dead.
Clerics can't do that.
No, clerics as a sort of construct creature.
If your refrigerator dies, you don't call a cleric.
You don't go bless your refrigerator.
No, you call the Maytag guy. So he was healing and repairing Modrons just left and right. And then the guy from Dark Sun, who they don't have any steel. Steel is a valuable metal there. And he's like, come on, guys, look at all this steel laying around.
Oh, yeah.
We're rich beyond dreams. And the Modrons are like, put the bodies of our honored dead down, sir.
Yeah, so you have one guy that's resurrecting Modron. You have another guy that's basically grave robbing.
Yeah.
In the city.
There it is. So,
yeah.
Mr. Producer.
Oh, Dad.
Or Dad, if you can show that. So, Troy, again, I found the map. This is the earlier ages, the world of Kryn, and the continent whose name I cannot remember.
Well, it says salami right across the front of it.
No, that's the continent of Ansalon. So that's Ansalon before they drop the mountain on it, and after they drop the mountain on it.
Yeah, you see all those rivers on the left side? It literally turned that continent into just a group of islands.
Yeah, sorry I missed that, guys, earlier. Trying to go through all these books with our schedule. We've got huge live events coming up in a couple weeks that we've been getting ready for. So
different conventions and stuff. I'm excited.
Juggling things. Forgot which pages those maps were on, but again, depending on the age, the world is a different place.
It's much smaller in one.
In some regards, it is. But throughout it, active gods, high magic, high fantasy, and thanks to the Tinker Gnomes, some really interesting inventions. So it'd be like the 1890s where you're in a farming community, but every once in a while you might see a Model T, or the trains aren't that, so it's not, when you encountered it in the world setting, like, what is that incredible contraption? It's one of those like, oh, cool, a gnomish device.
You're like, oh, so that's what a car is.
Yeah. so they're not unheard of, they're not unknown. They're just not something that you might see in your everyday life at this point. But you will encounter them in larger cities. You will encounter them on the battlefields. And so that's important to note in the magic versus technology section here in Dragonlance in particular. So you do have bows and crossbows and those sort of kind of machines, traps and dungeons. But when it comes to the actual machines, trebuchets, some onagers, some of the bazookas and goofy stuff will be present, but they're not going to be common.
So I'll make just a quick reference as a cross game system. Blood Bowl, which is a lot of fun to play. The gnome team has a steamroller.
Yes.
It's not a weapon, it's a transportation device, so they're allowed to use it on the field. But because you have Tinker Gnomes running around, that's what you get.
I figured they would have been the ball.
Well, that's the goblins. The goblins like to do that.
The kobolds.
The kobolds.
The goblin grabs the ball and bear hugs it. The orc picks up the goblin and throws him.
It's an ogre, but yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Blood Bowl is a fantastically fun, turn-based sort of tactics style.
It's football.
It's D&D.
It's football to the death.
It's D&D plus Madden.
Yeah. So for those of you that are out playing on PlayStation, Blood Bowl 3 is now on PlayStation. Blood Bowl 2 with all the team expansions is something that we'll plan to bring you for football season.
Yes.
So check that out with us here later this year. But it's one of those things that can be a fun break when you're exploring Undermountain. You hear all this cheering. Like, what the heck is this? And now arriving on the field, the team from the upper world. And like, oh, what the? Like, oh, well, now we're playing football against these illithids.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Hey, that's cheating. You can't use your mind to control the ball.
Hooray for Zoidberg.
Yeah. the Illithid section is cheering for them in unison and very monotone.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
Go team. They're all mind controlled.
For sure. But Blood Bowl can be an interesting addition. And again, you will find that the Gnome team has their own transportation in the form of a steamroller. So I will take a moment to mention it's the was it Descendant or Avernus has some really good rules for war machines. So if you want to get involved with really adding some epic scale beyond riding a dragon and fighting dragons, which is already really cool, Descendant Avernus war machine rules can allow you to bring in some really cool gnomish contraptions onto the battlefield. And those rules will allow your players to operate them or interact.
I like the one that's just like this large car that has this thing sticking out and then two spinning it's like a chain with a rock on the end. It's like a helicopter prop basically. Yeah, they did it in Army of Darkness.
Yeah.
It was that, but it's a gnome device that's meant for the battlefield. It's literally a car with a flail on the front.
One of the things I was looking at as we're moving through this, we've kind of covered a lot of the high points of the lore.
Yeah.
So I mentioned here, there was a god, and in the lore here, they had he created the others to help him with the subdivide the tasks of creation. In the Age of Creation, we get a lot of things there where, as they move forward and the races spring up to control magic, they create 3 moons. So the 3 moons control magic, good, neutral, and evil. And then, of course, the races will spring up from there. Gnomes were the first small race, and the dwarves, halflings, kinder, all that progenitor from there. And sort of depending on where you go into the age, particularly if you're playing the War of the Lance and you start at the Age of Despair, it's 300 years past the Cataclysm where Ishtar had the mountain thrown at him and the world has been reshaped. So it's not uninhabitable. We're not talking Mars here. You've got forests and lakes and rivers and things like that, but that sort of upheaval is definitely something that the land is still shaking off, the cultures are still shaking off, and as I mentioned, the dark goddess Sarakesis is making her play, and the dragon armies are starting to move down in the Age of Despair. A lot of the earlier lore is not necessary to be fully polished on to play the 5th edition module, and there is a decent primer that will get you up to speed so that you can jump right into the War of the Lance and the Age of Despair. But there's some really interesting things about the Chronicler. So there's I forget the NPC's name. I forgot to put him in my notes. But he's responsible for sort of the large canonical timeline. He's a librarian and chronicler, and then there's his student after that. So when it comes to Faerun, for example, and you're looking at all the old 2nd edition material, they've got 10 different calendars. You're like, okay, we're just going to use Dale Reckoning because that's the easiest, but you can really deep dive into that. Same thing goes for Dragonlance. They Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss did a lot of work to really build up the history so that when they finally started to tell the story in the Age of Despair, they knew what had happened before and what was going to come because of that. So, as you get into Dragonlance, particularly if you plan to play in the earlier ages, familiarize yourself with the lore around that, where things are, what does the land look like, and the other thing to keep in mind are the motivations, right? Who's doing what and why are they doing it? Because that's really going to inform your story, and the lore will play into that a little bit. So, with Dragonlance having sort of like this huge split in the middle of it, if you're playing on the Age of Despair side, a lot of that can be considered lost knowledge, and then if you're playing before that, then that's going to be some of your more academic type knowledge. And that's going to be my notes for lore when it gets into Dragonlance. There's just so much of it; it's hard to kind of cover all of it. But the Knights of Somnia, yeah.
When you talk about the lore of a country, continent.
Yeah.
You look at all the history and the different things that happened. Dragonlance is just chock full of it.
Right.
It has just thousands of years of history.
Well, developed over 190 novels.
Right.
I mean, not everything was.
There's just so much.
Yeah, not everything was Age of Despair when it was written. So.
What I suggest to you guys, if you get any of the books, the new books that 5th edition has out that cover a portion of the Dragonlance, I would highly encourage you to look up some of the older material, especially in the novels.
At least just this book, at the very least,
to give you a sense more of just more that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I've seen, what they're reproducing is a small section of some of this. And I think that does a disservice to our 5e players.
Especially how popular this was when it first came out.
Oh, it's crazy how popular it was. You don't sell 20 million copies worldwide in 12 languages if it's not popular.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very popular, and there's a reason for that. I love the stories. They're lots of fun to read. But if you do like Dragonlance, I highly encourage you to go seek out some of this older material to help add a little more flavor to your stories that you're doing in Dragonlance.
Yeah. Now, to expand on this a little bit, Mr. Producer, if I could have you go ahead, we'll pull up the D&D 2e Adventures cover again. You can find this sometimes on eBay, and I think you can even get reprints on demand.
Yeah.
And usually those are PDFs that are $10 to $15. It's a great resource that can fill in the blanks that the 5e module, because it's only got about 36 pages of world primer before you really get into the 5 adventures in that book. So this can really fill in some of those blanks if you really want to expand into Dragonlance. Pull up the 5e there.
I mean, this 2nd edition hardback is 126 pages of material that they've only reproduced some of it.
Yeah, again, 36 pages and some of that.
That's
it's those pages are all relevant for that module, right? So it's very much Age of Despair. But doesn't get into what the elves are doing, what the dwarves are doing, what all that sort of stuff, because we're in a very particular area.
Well, I mean, it's a module. You don't need to know all of that stuff to run the module.
Exactly. So, but if you want to run the world setting, this would be a good place to start.
But you, as the DM, want to go beyond.
To
the side of that module's what it has as a structure. If you like the Dragonlance world setting, highly encourage you to seek out some.
Even if you are going to run the 5e module, rule number 2 still exists. You're going to need more information.
Yeah, your players never do what you want them to.
Right.
And so when they take the left at the fork, this will show you what's over there. What we've got up on the screen right now is the alt art. Very cool art for this. On the cover is Lord Solus, I believe it was.
After he became a Death Knight?
Yeah, so he was originally a light of Solomnia. During the whole deal with Ishtar, he and his guys were not able to stop that war with the dragons, and so were cursed. So at this point, when we see him in the 5th edition module, he is a Death Knight and is working to raise death dragons. So he's got his own set of things, but I will say that he's not the primary antagonist of the story here, where we're dealing with this. I believe it was the Blue Dragon Army in this first part of the novel. But he does make an appearance. The things that he's working on, his goals, will have him running across the players in many different areas. And he's a very cool character. His motivations are very interesting. The lore that he ties into in the setting is very neat. And then I want to show you there the Dragonlance Castle. Bring that up for me. So this is cool. This isn't Castle Dragonlance. We don't have a Castle at Dragonlance. But this is the main castle at Ishtar. And as I mentioned earlier, where they had built their civilization on top of that dragon graveyard, Lord Solus gets it airborne again and starts pumping out death dragons from there. It's going to be something that you see features in the War of the Lance. It's very cool. And it sort of shows off how high magic this setting really can be.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot to resurrect a dragon.
For sure. And he's over there just making it happen. So you'll have several death dragons. One of the cool figures, if you guys are hitting up your local game stores, it's a little expensive, but you'll see Lord Solus on a death dragon. It's a fairly large.
Super cool.
It's very cool.
You know, that would be a cool one to have to add to your collection, just to keep it in the case, not even for the game.
I want the full size Orcus for the end of my campaign.
Oh yeah, he's big, and then of course the Tiamat would be a very cool one to have. Even though she doesn't make a physical appearance, her presence is known. But you're gonna run into a couple of the likes of
Salami.
I can't do it.
It's okay. I've been listening, and I don't think you accidentally have said it.
No, not yet. But
Not yet.
So that's going to be one of the things. That's actually the 5th adventure in the 5e module is going to be bringing that to your players outside the wall. You get to defend. Like, this is how epic it is. There are dragons everywhere. You are in a walled city. They are attacking with a flying castle, and the dragon army on the ground. So there's 10, 20,000 dragon army, dragon flying. They bring a castle. It's a lot to look forward to. It's a very cool setting with a really lot to dig into. And so the module's cool. I'm really looking forward to the potential of a couple others to finish off the War of the Lance. Would be a lot of fun here in 5th edition. So if anybody from Wizards of the Coast, doubtful, is watching this, you know, we would love to see that. Just finish off that series because it is it's so well written, and it's what launched Dragonlance back in the 80s. And you know, that's sort of what we're looking at when it comes to lore. You're gonna see where a lot of that, you know, pre-Catalysm stuff does come up. So what do you got there for me, Troy?
Well, I think we've covered Dragonlance.
Now, I haven't actually had a chance to play Dragonlance. When I was playing with you, when we were playing 2nd edition, I did a lot of Greyhawk, a little bit of Faerun, a little bit of Ravenloft, and a lot of Planescape. Yeah. But you've actually played in Dragon. So what are some of the things that you can tell our folks, our viewers, about Dragonlance from a player's perspective, even with the bit that you've been in there?
Well, Rick, who's my DM at the time, used to throw a lot of oddball magic stuff at us. Yeah, I say oddball because when you're starting out as a new player and you're used to what goes on in the world setting, and you get hit with these missiles or you get hit with those spells, you know, it's normal to you. Right. But Dragonlance was one of the first other outside normal world settings that we went into, and the creatures are different. I remember the first time we got hit with Draconians.
Oh man!
We were out in a road. We were walking from one place to another, and they jumped us on the road.
Yeah, particularly important at that time. Dragonborn human dragonoids were not a feature at all in any D&D lore.
No, so it took us a while to figure out, you know, what these 6-foot-tall dragons wanted. But other than just beating the hell out of us, we were in their way, and it was a fight that ended.
Well, we do know now that they are evil dragons possessed by demons. So
yeah. So some of their abilities, and I read off some of their abilities because I remember in those early encounters with them, some of the things they were doing, and all of us were just like, "What the hell is this thing?"
Yeah, there's like more than one of them.
There's more than one of them. And they're 6-foot-tall dragons, and they're throwing these spells at us. And then they're hitting us with swords. And this guy's throwing hand axes, and they were just doing all this crap to us. I'm like, what is this? And the book's also talking there about some of their natural defenses. Oh, yeah. So some of our spells weren't having the desired effect as quickly as what we were used to. And other weapons just weren't being as effective.
Right, because of their magical nature. Or
their magical nature, but also
toughness.
They have hide, so their natural armor class is like,
12, I think, is like gives it a plus 2.
On a THAC0,
is an 8.
THAC0, it'd be like an 8. So
don't even pretend we don't know how to figure out THAC0. It's just.
but in 5th edition, it would be something like a 23.
It's okay, Matt. THAC0 doesn't exist. THAC0 can't hurt you.
Right. So it'd be like a 5th edition armor class of 20, 22, 23, 24.
Yeah, high level stuff like guys in plate mail +1, +2.
Total, and then because of their hide, you had to have weapons. One of them, I forget which one it is. You had to have a magic weapon to even hit it, even harm it. And so we got our butts handed to us several times before we figured out what was going on. Mm-hmm. And then the other dragon, the Draconians, it wasn't dragon. It must have been Draconians.
Yeah,
because basically we were hired as mercenaries to hunt them.
Right.
And so there's a very famous picture in Tracy Hickman issues. It's one of their books. They have a hunting party and they have a draconian hanging from the tree.
Kind of like you would have a big
like a deer.
catfish or a deer, yeah.
Right, and they're getting their picture made with it. And I've shown it to some of the 5th edition players who just love the Dragonborn, just love the Dragonborn, this Dragonborn, that.
Yeah, we used to hunt them.
We used to hunt them. And they're different, but
yeah, it just goes to show the in the setting, for sure. Like that was normalized within the setting. There was no care given because of their evil origin, their evil nature.
They're evil through and through. Like you just read, they were.
It's like if we had captured Chucky and strung him up by his feet. No one cares.
Yeah,
Murder this little doll man.
Yes.
So, definitely, it's not exactly the same, but it gives you some insight into the mindset or the lore, the cultures, the feelings.
But
of that.
also, I mean, there's obviously a difference between Draconians and the Dragonborn.
Yeah.
And I don't know that the Dragonborn are even in the 5th edition world setting of Dragonlance, are they?
They're not mentioned specifically in the module, but there's no prohibition against them either.
Well, I mean, if Draconian and like if the worlds had mixed and then Dragonborn came over here, I'd expect
because the worlds mixed, and that's how the Draconians got here.
Yeah.
Well, no, so that was a spell plague affecting specifically Faerun.
Right. So they're in Faerun.
Yes.
But are they in Dragonlance?
They can be, which is why we talked a little bit earlier about how you might handle that. There's no prohibition in the 5e material, so you can go play a bugbear, anything out of the Monsters of the Multiverse, whatever, depending on your game. So 5e Dragonlance doesn't say you can't play these races here.
So if we have, let's say we had a group of Dragonborn.
Yes.
For whatever crazy reason. We're all Dragonborns.
Mm-hmm.
And we had that same encounter where a group of Draconians jumped out of the bushes. Those Dragonborn are going to have a bad day too.
For sure.
Because they don't have all those abilities.
No.
They do have some neat abilities.
For sure. But they're going to be just like any other adventurer, relying on their steel and their swords.
But then
they maybe have a breath weapon. I mean,
but after the fight, you're going to have a talk because our cousins just jumped out of the bushes and kicked our butt.
In the lore of the Dragonborn, they're very much a prideful, loyal, honorable race. They're not necessarily strangers to fighting with other clans. So from the standpoint of a Dragonborn that has grown up around other Dragonborn, or even mixed around and been in Faerun, so if you come from Spelljammer, those sorts of things aren't going to be too unfamiliar to them. It may be throw them for a loop because, like, look at these guys have wings and all these other things they were doing.
It would definitely be something that if I was going to have a 5e campaign, and somebody wanted to play Dragonborn, like, this is going to be interesting, and somebody's going to get hurt.
Especially from the standpoint of if you were a character that came from the world of Krynn.
Yeah.
Since they don't in the lore exist there already. That may be a little more interesting trying to set that character into the context of
Dragonborn walking into a village. Now you get a very rude welcome.
For sure, he's going to be more like the gnomes and dwarves in that they're going to live up where other people aren't, if they exist in the setting. So just be mindful of that, where you want to make sure that the characters that your players create have context into the game.
One of the other things that we got as a adventuring group to go do, we got hired by a wizard to go get this meteorite that had fell.
Okay.
And he had done a lot of research, and the meteorite's going to fall on this date. It's going to be over here. There's all this prophecy, and so he hired us to be at this area so we could get it and bring it back to him, because it was going to be the raw components to make a Dragonlance.
Oh wow!
And so it was going to be a meteorite steel, and it's going to be turned into a Dragonlance. So we're there, and we're like, a Dragonlance. What's a Dragonlance, and why is it so special? And then we get the whole story of it and stuff, and like, wow, that's pretty cool. So we were like, well, can we have part of that steel? And they're like, no, it's going to need a lot of steel to make. He's going to make one of the big ones.
Yes.
And it's like, wow, okay. So we got it, and of course it's too heavy for us to carry. It's like an engine block or a little bit bigger,
It's a
and
space
it
block.
was
Yeah.
several 100 pounds of this steel. So we had to get a wagon to carry it in. Well, wagons don't go very fast. In fact, turns out Draconians can run faster than a wagon can go. So we had a lot of excitement trying to get that meteorite back to
Especially with the one beating his wings running faster.
Oh my gosh. They basically hounded us, and we thought we were going to be dead. We thought we were not going to make it because we literally had two of our players were laying in the back of the wagon unconscious at 0 hit points.
Oh yeah.
They were like, first guy get a potion. Well, dude, I need my potion now because I'm still awake. These guys, you're at 0, you're unconscious, nothing else happened to you.
You made your death save, you're good.
You're good. But I'm going to be, yeah. And so then the whole debate started, and I can't find anywhere in there, but I would put it past them. Do Draconians eat the dead?
Oh no. That's probably one of those things that's best left to the question of the players' minds, just because they're going to come and get you.
Yeah, because a couple people are almost dead. And like, if you guys get wiped out, they're going to eat us. Because we were part of our guys were convinced that was why they were hunting us in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, nothing short of a wish is bringing you back from that.
Yeah, as food, why they were hunting us. And, over time, of course, the story comes out, these guys are running around doing things for the bad guys. Yeah. And we were just at the low levels of it. But there's a lot of things about the world of Dragonlance that are really neat. Mm-hmm. Try not to let it overwhelm you. Okay, you have these big things going on. In any world setting, Ravenloft, as an example, there's a lot of crap going on in Ravenloft. Well, if you play it, you don't want to start at that level.
Right. You need to be here, like you on the road.
You're down here on the road.
Well, even that's bad in Ravenloft.
You're trying to keep the gypsies from picking your pocket.
Well, which is way easier to deal with than the Strahd.
Yeah,
right.
Or the werewolf den.
Yeah.
Or
if you start your players off in your game at that kind of level, mm-hmm. and slowly bring them up so that they're higher levels and dealing with a more upper echelon of bad guys, and you work them through those levels, they'll appreciate that story too.
Luckily, the 5th edition module does have a really good easing.
Yeah.
So, the party gathers at this fishing village. They've received a message from friend. And so, okay, we go here and we do this. And then they've got some time to sort of acclimate before the adventure really kicks off. So in that regard, the 5e module is definitely going to be a good place for you as the game master and your players to sort of ease in to the world of Dragonlance before you really have the adventure. And I think they've done a good job in sort of ramping up the adventure through the 5 modules that are in that book. But to Troy's point, by the time you get to there, like I said earlier, floating castle, 20,000 dragons. So it's an exponential increase.
Yeah, little bit of a difficulty spike.
Yeah, there's a difficulty spike. But you'll ramp up a little bit. Before we finish up with lore, I did want to mention. So from the book series, these are names that you may be familiar with, even in passing through 5th edition D&D. But if you've been with D&D for a long time, there's Rasslin, Paramon, Tanis, Tasselhoff,
Burfoot,
Flint, Goldmoon, Riverwind, Sturm, Tika, and Lorana.
Sturm, Bright Blade, man.
Yeah. So those are the NPCs or the heroes of the lance as we'd find them in a large, or at least the first big sets of Dragonlance novels.
Absolutely.
And so those characters were the ones we talked about earlier that were played at the table, developed for the story.
They're so much alive that they come off the pages. They're just...
And that's one of the things too, as you guys are writing, and particularly if you're putting together your bad guys, to have Troy take on the life of Rasslin and bring out a personality, quirks, traits, likes, dislikes, how he operates. And then have him over here and he's playing Tasselhoff, or I'm over here playing...
He can't play Tasselhoff. I got Tasselhoff.
But you get the idea, and this is why these characters stand out so well, is that there are true individuals behind them that developed these characters and then came together.
The character was developed...
They made the character to play the game, and when they played the game, they started developing the character.
And then they wrote him into a book.
Right. Any player will sit down with their character in a game at first level. You don't really know things about them, but as you play them for a while, you start developing quirks and traits and little sayings and little things that develop them into a personality. And we're doing that, and then the two of them sat down and said,
Margaret Weiss took all that as our notes.
Took
and
all
wrote
that.
all the character. Yeah,
and even the game they were playing became the book.
100%.
And it's just so Tazelhoff Burfoot, okay.
He's
Kinder.
Kinder, our kleptomaniac, because of the way that man played that character.
Into a tavern, and it's just a classic tavern. People eating, people drinking, and there's an old man by the fire, so they're trying to stay warm. And then the innkeeper's watching everybody closely. And Tazelhoff's over by the old man just because he's the most interesting person there. And he's looking around, and there's some shiny baubles up on top of the mantle, just because that's where the innkeeper's wife put them to like decorate the place.
Yeah.
Well, the next thing you know, he's fiddling with one. He turns around, he walks off, and the old man didn't really say anything, but the bartender saw it.
Right.
He says, "You want to give me that, my friend, before I have to charge you for it?" He's like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "You just put that shiny bauble in your pocket. I saw you take it off the mantelpiece." He says, "What this? What are you talking about? This is mine." He says, "I saw you take it off the mantelpiece." "No, I took it out of my pocket to show it to you." "Well, that's mine. It can't be yours. It was in my pocket. How could it be yours?"
And thus, Kinder knows, or Kinder.
It can't possibly be yours. It was in my pocket.
As a side note, I will go ahead and plug our, Troy's excellent adventure, Romper Room, Adventures in Babysitting, where we take 3 heroes and we have them babysit 3 Kinder children. Kinder children. All they have to do is get them to eat dinner and go to bed.
Good
and
luck.
it never ever happens.
No, usually
So,
the place burns down, or you know.
It's a live event that we run for charity. Things that are included in the game are things like T-shirt of spider climb, pacifier of invisibility, and a tricycle of passwall.
And haste. It has haste and passwall.
Oh, haste and passwall.
So it goes
the bell of ravenous hunger in the kitchen.
The chime of uncontrollable hunger.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
it's just shenanigans for 3 hours.
we'll have a video soon of when we played it for charity last year, but it's a game that we run when we're at our live events. So keep an eye on the schedule, and you may be able to find one of those 6 seats available for play. It's a good time for both new and experienced players, and good luck to you.
Yeah, like 80% of the time the house burns down.
We're actually going to plan and play it at Tremendicon, which is in 2 weeks.
July 7th, 8th, and 9th in Springfield, Missouri.
And I was just informed today that we've been demanded to play it again at VisionCon, which is in October. Both of those conventions going on here in Springfield, Missouri. Good times to have by all. And if you can't get into play, at least come by and watch.
It's a blast.
But audience participation is encouraged and makes the game what it is.
Yes. For VisionCon, we're going to be playing again as our charity.
Yep.
Which there are items for the bystanders. There's things for the bystanders to do as well. So I'll leave it at that. Come see us at VisionCon in October, Springfield, Missouri, and we'll all have fun with that.
Yep. One last bit here.
Yep.
So, Death Knight, Lord Soth, and Kitiara Uth Mater, the half-sister of Rastlin and Cameron, leader of one of the dragon armies. Oh yeah, so.
No, stop. You said it too fast. One of the dragon armies.
Yeah, there's only 3. But
there's more than one.
But it's an army of dragons. There shouldn't even be one. Why are there 3?
But this is what I mentioned. I'm all over the place. I apologize. But
you're fine.
Lord Soth on the cover of the Dragonlance 5e module, particularly the altar art. According to Hickman, Lord Soth is the most unpredictable character to write about, saying this: "Every time that character made an appearance in one of our books, he would try to run off with the story." He's a very cool character, and so you'll see when you get a chance to at least read through the 5e module, if not play it yourself.
So
Lord Soth, though he's not in control of the dragon army, though he's not the main antagonist, the things he does really amps it up. And then, of course, the dragon army itself. So there's again some of the lore.
I'll tell you how I like to describe him. Simple and easy. He's Darth Vader with ADD.
He really is actually kind of all over the place.
He can destroy anything at the whim, but with ADD, he's like off over there now.
Yeah.
And look, he's over there now.
Did you not want to continue to raise a dragon, death dragon? There's like 40 of them, and they're hungry. Oh, he's gone. He's gone.
It's exactly right.
And there goes his TIE fighter.
And ultimate level of I can destroy anything. Countries are no longer even a threat.
Particularly when we find him during the War of the Lance as a Death Knight. He's not something that most of the time you're going to be able to confront directly, just as a Death Knight, but in particular because of the curse he's got, the powers he's obtained.
Well, I remember, I think it was one of the older editions for the D&D, but there's a Death Knight ability that was a once per day cast that was 20d6 fireball.
Yeah, that was like
20.
Yeah.
2-0. That's a lot.
That you cast Fireball as a 20th level magic.
Fireball.
Yeah, it's only first level. You only get to do it once per day. I don't care. 20d6.
So
yeah, Death Knights are bad news, and he's a Death Knight plus.
So the Death Knight rides a horse. It's called a Nightmare.
Yeah.
And that horse in and of itself is from the elemental plane of the abyss of hell.
Yeah.
But it has all kinds of other abilities as well. So when you put a Death Knight upon a war horse on the battlefield, it's destroying all kinds of stuff.
Well, you put a Death Knight on the back of a Death Dragon.
Yeah.
On the battlefield, so it's like,
yeah,
it gets to be a lot of fun. I wanted to mention some of that in the lore section, particularly if you can go find those novels. They're not super expensive. Amazon's got them. They are a great read with a lot of really cool stuff. Yeah. And again, if Wizards can give us the other two parts of the War of the Lance, it's going to be a really, really cool campaign. I think it might be one of the best that they've got. So that's all I've got today for Dragonlance. Troy, do you have anything else you wanted to put in?
I'm glad to see it being reprinted, and all these kids playing today are being exposed to the material, and then otherwise they wouldn't even known it existed. I highly encourage anybody out there reading it and playing it to try to find some of the older material to add more spice to your game. You'll love it.
Yeah. And then, Mr. Producer, you got anything that you want to add?
Well, the new World of Kryn Dragonlance stuff that's coming out is making me excited for them to get some like Greyhawk or something like that.
Yeah, we're looking forward to Greyhawk later this year. And then in October, we're going to get Planescape.
Yeah, I'm actually worried about Planescape because there's so much. I very seriously doubt they're going to release.
You guys don't want to miss Planescape.
There's a lot.
Troy
It'll be really cool.
Is the Planescape guy, and behind Mr. Producer is a milk crate of 5 box sets. So we're hoping we hope that you're excited for Planescape too, because we really want to see Wizards bring a lot of that out, because Planescape changed Dungeons and Dragons.
Not only that, but the fabric of existence has changed because of 4th edition.
Well, then there's a lot that will go into that, so it'll be really interesting to see what does come forward and what doesn't, or how it's changed, and what possible shenanigans we can get up to in the multiverse.
Really cool. So
and I'm looking forward to introducing a lot of you new players to the Lady of Pain.
Yeah.
The creator and ruler of the city of Sigil, the center of the multiverse.
Tieflings are cool when they're in Faerun, but a plane-walking tiefling is way crazier. And so we're looking forward to some of that. But for sure, I'm with you.
Oh, yeah, I'm very excited.
Because Dragonlance, great.
Because Dragonlance was really cool, and they definitely chose the right adventure to bring into 5th edition, so I'm just hoping they continue that trend, with Greyhawk and stuff like that. So Greyhawk, they definitely did really good, and I'm looking forward to more.
Yeah, Greyhawk ended up with 3 box sets. The middle one, Greyhawk War, it was 4 box sets. Because I remember there's Greyhawk War, From the Ashes, and then
City Greyhawk.
Oh, well, yeah. So a box set for the city of Greyhawk by itself. Yeah. A lot of adventures inside the city. So
I think they ran out of names because they had the continent of Greyhawk. I said, well, we're going to build a capital city that runs everything. What are we going to name it? I know, Greyhawk. It's the capital. It's the city. So it's Greyhawk.
Well, what are we gonna call the castle in this city?
It's called Castle Greyhawk.
Is it really?
Yes.
I wouldn't have guessed.
He's like, it's Gygax, and I'm like, Gary, hold on.
So it's the song Bad Company, written by Bad Company, on the album Bad Company.
It's like, well, New York.
Yeah.
The place so nice they named it twice. We're going to Greyhawk. Okay, we're going to Greyhawk. What?
I've got a letter here to Greyhawk, care of Greyhawk, Castle Greyhawk. You're like, yeah. For sure. But as a setting, it was very cool. One of your classic fantasy settings.
More dragons.
There's a lot of dragons, but we also had a lot going on. There's like slavers in the South. Evil to the east, Ayuz, the god of darkness.
Really cool barbarian tribes in the north.
Barbarians in the north. Orcs as part of that.
Yeah.
It's just a lot to get into.
Here you have frost barbarians.
Yeah.
And above them, in the colder, is ice barbarians. And then above it, so it kind of progresses.
Yeah. And
snow, frost, ice.
So if you guys aren't playing Dragonlance yet, try to get into a game at your local game store. Maybe
Absolutely.
pick up the book. I'm sure you may be able to find it in different locations. It's very well written. The content is great. The game itself is a lot of fun. And then if you want to expand into the world of Kryn, Spelljammer is a great place to go. And so are some of this older, fairly easy to access.
And there's already an adventure written, ready to go, so you can bridge your games together.
Yep. And then particularly with Spelljammer, you've already got those 5e resources. We talked about that on our last episode. So, go out there and play it. Have fun. This is great. Classic content, but it's epic. It's the big adventures that we all really want to go and do. You're going to find it in Dragonlance.
Absolutely, 100%.
Cool. So until next time, I guess, I'm Jester Borris with I Want to Be a Game Master, or I Want to Be a GM.
Oh, Troy, the Planescape guy.
I am
one at the end is Mr. Producer.
I am still Mr. Producer.
He says clicking
from I Want to Be a
Clicking
GM.
buttons.
.com, Facebook, Twitch, Discord, and YouTube. We will see you later.
Okay, lady. Love you. Bye-bye.
Good job, Woodian.